There is nothing more lonely than feeling like you are dying. Who can possibly understand? But Jacob's story in Genesis shows us he has been there. Jacob's story is our proclamation in our time of distress. If you are fighting for your life today against the ravages of COVID-19, let Jacob's proclamation be yours. God, my life belongs to you, but today belongs to me. If the sun rises on me today, I will fight for my life, as Jacob fought for his. If your angels are hovering here, tell them I said, move along now. There will be nothing to see here today. Like the master storyteller at summer camp, the book of Genesis invites us to see ourselves in its stories and challenges us to compare our perspective to God's. Welcome to And God Remembered, Genesis as Story.
Thank you, folks, for joining me. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start this off as a pilot of a podcast series that I am planning. This started as a writing project about 5 years ago. It originated with just my own personal interest and love for ancient religious literature and ancient biblical stories like the ones that we find in Genesis. But it also arose from a real tragic experience that I saw some friends of mine go through. I have a couple that have a couple boys. They have two boys, I have two boys. And the boy's father and I played softball together. I watched as his boys grew up. They would goof around the field when we were playing. And one of them one day was driving home. Of course, he had grown up and he was driving home. And somebody had been high on drugs, passed out, and his car crossed over the median and plowed into my friend's son. And he died on that freeway that day. And I watched them bury him and just go through what, as the father of two boys, I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like. And you ask yourself, how do you tell someone like that God loves them? And the conclusion I drew was that you don't. When you go through something like that, you're gripped with this sense that God has just utterly forgotten and abandoned you. Now, being a student of the stories in Genesis, that's familiar, because that's very much where the characters in the stories of Genesis will find themselves from time to time, in that place of feeling that God has forgotten them. And the stories remind us at very key points in Genesis, and God remembered. And so I figured that was that was the only way that you could speak into the hearts of people who go through things that are just so deeply gripping and troubling, things that make you feel like God has forgotten you. And I think that's the time we're in today. How many people have lost loved ones to COVID-19? How many of them are gripped with this unspeakable grief that they were not able to be at the bedside of their loved one when they passed? How many of them must think that God has forgotten them? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this writing project and I'm going to basically make a podcast series out of it and call it And God Remembered, Genesis as Story. Now, normally I would start at the beginning, but I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to jump forward to Genesis 32 and the story of Jacob, gripped with a fear for his life and then he fought with God. And we're going to see what that may have to say to us today in this difficult time.
So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants. And I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight." Then the message returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is also coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that were with him, and the flocks and herds and camels, into 2 companies. And he said, "If Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape." Then Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you.' I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So he lodged there that same night, and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass over before me, and put some distance between successive droves." And he commanded the first one, saying, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, 'To whom do you belong? And where are you going? Whose are these in front of you?' Then you shall say, 'They are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau. And behold, he also is behind us.'" So he commanded the second, the third, and all who followed the droves, saying, "In this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And also say, Behold, your servant Jacob is behind us." For he said, "I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face, and perhaps he will accept me." So the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed them there. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel. For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over Peniel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank.
Well, folks, there's obviously a lot there. It's an entire chapter of Genesis, but I think the story it tells is very compelling in this time. You know, if I were to take this and turn it into that, typical classic 3-point sermon, I might divide it up into three, like saying, okay, Jacob prepared for the worst, Jacob hoped for the best, and then Jacob fought for his life. But I think what we need to do with this is we just need to focus on this moment that we're at. And if I want this to go to anybody, and if I want my voice to be heard by anybody, I want it to be heard by those who are actually fighting for their lives. Because we can look and see how Jacob prepared for this. I mean, Jacob feared for the worst, because if you know the Bible, if you know this biblical story, you know that Jacob kind of stole the blessing from Esau of his father Isaac. And so Jacob is afraid that Esau's coming for his revenge. And so Jacob, he takes his family and he breaks them into two camps. The Hebrew Mahanaim literally means two camps. And the hope is, of course, as Jacob said, that if Esau attacks one, then the other will survive. So Esau is preparing for the worst. Well, there's nothing we could have done to prepare for this coronavirus. If you're sick, there's just no way that, you could think that you could have done anything to prepare for this. You're just where you are. But the second thing we see here is that Jacob hopes for the best. And that is, I think, where we can be. It's not the most important place for us to be. I think that comes when we talk about Jacob fighting for his life. But we can hope for the best. And the reason why we have this hope is because there's this worldview that we have in Western civilization, and this worldview runs to the heart of modern medicine. The world is not some disorderly system that runs at the capricious whim of this, that, or the other god, right? The world is created, the world is ordered, and because it's created and ordered, we can study and understand it. And that means that the sciences and medicine gives us hope, because modern medicine and modern science arises from a view of our world as being created by God with an order to it that we can understand and study and then predict. And so that's really where the foundations of modern medicine are. So we have a lot of reason for hope. There's a lot of good studies going on out there that will help us going forward into the future. We had H1N1 back in, I think, 2009. The H1N1 virus vaccine is now a standard part of our flu vaccine. And every October, between myself, my wife, and our two boys, we're always checking in with each other. The boys are college age now, making sure, hey, October is here. The flu virus is available. The vaccine is available. Let's make sure we're all taking care of ourselves. Well, that day will come with COVID-19. It's going to take some time. So here we are now. If you have this virus, there's nothing you could have done to prepare for it. And there is reason for hope. But what matters now is the story of Jacob and how he fought with God. There are biblical scholars who will get into this. Why was it that the man here in Genesis says, "Let me go because the day is breaking"? There are some discussions as to ancient beliefs and why the dialogue worked that way. But that's not really important to us right now. What really matters to us right now is this idea that if the day breaks on my life, then I will reckon my life to be a gift from God. And so I can say to God, if I have COVID-19, and it's really hard for us to, it's hard to say, if I get this disease, here's how I'm going to act, or, here's how I hope I would act. I hope I would have the strength of faith and character to say, God, you gave me today. My life belongs to you, but today belongs to me. You gave me my life today, and so I'm fighting for my life today, just as Jacob fought for his. And I think that that's where we want to be if we get to this place where we are afflicted with a viral pneumonia from this disease. We want to be in the place that Jacob was. We want to be fighting for our lives. We will find ourselves fighting for our lives. And Jacob's testimony needs to be our testimony at that point. That's when we say, Lord, I'm sorry, you gave me today. And so I'm fighting for my life today. And so if the angels are up there hovering, waiting to see what's going to happen, you can tell your angels, no, move along. Move along. There's nothing to see here today. Because today belongs to me. And I'm fighting for my life today. And that, I think, is a very spiritual, deeply, deeply spiritual place to be. And that's what I think the story of Genesis has, this story in Genesis has for us today. Fight for your life today. And then you will be able to stand before the Lord, and he will be able to say, you fought with God and you fought with man and you prevailed. If you're suffering from this virus and somehow by way of the loved one that somehow makes it possible that you're able to hear this, you take hold of Jacob's story. You fight for your life today. And you just tell the Lord, and let me just say, even if you haven't had, even if you haven't been to church, you might be, I've got some friends that, they're frankly angry at God because of some of the things that happened in their lives. And I don't blame them based on some of the things that I've seen. I have friends who have buried children and they're angry with God, and that's okay. God would rather have you be angry at him than have you turn your back on him altogether. So no matter where you are, no matter how you feel about God, if you're in that place, you just simply say, God, my life belongs to you, but today belongs to me, and I'm fighting for my life today. And I think there's something transformational about this that can draw you closer to him, even in this time of difficulty. that's what I think the story of Genesis 32 has for us. That is why I think it's so important to just let Genesis be the story that it is. And so God bless you, and I'm going to continue on with podcasts like this. And God remember Genesis, a story.